So, you know, thinking about the fluidity of the blood is very important. I spoke about water. How about what you eat? Does that affect? Sure it does. Blood's not a simple fluid. You have the plasma, that's the watery substance, although it's clearly not water. But you also have these things floating like life rafts around there. Those are red cells. You know, if you spin your blood down in a centrifuge, you get some red stuff at the bottom. Those are your blood cells, and that can be up to 45% of the volume. Right. And the condition of those red cells is very important in blood flow. Red blood cells are about 8 microns, 7 to 8 microns in diameter. And the smallest blood vessels they flow through are only 4 microns in diameter.
Okay, how does that work?
Yeah, that's the question. How do you get an 8 micron thing through a 4 micron? Right. The red blood cell has to fold in half, squish and kind of slide through that tiny little capillary. Well, what if the red blood cell's stiff? And in fact, red blood cells do stiffen up. You know, if a diabetic comes to me and I want to know how their blood sugar has been running, I order something called a hemoglobin A1C. Well, what I'm really measuring is how much of the hemoglobin has sugar attached to it. Because red cells live for 3 months, and I can back figure and say, well, if your A1C is this, your blood sugar's been this. But what am I really measuring? Hemoglobin's a protein. And if it has sugar attached to it, its structure is changed and it becomes stiff. And if it's stiff, that red cell can't deform and flow through the capillaries.
So it's trying to get through.
Trying to get through, and it can't go. And we all know that diabetics have impaired circulation. That's why their feet, they get cut their toes off, and that's why their kidneys go bad. That's why they go blind. That's why they have an increased risk of heart attack, because they don't have good blood flow. One of the main reasons for that is stiff red blood cells. But that's true with all of us, whether we're diabetic or not. If we eat a diet that's high in refined sugars, our red cells will stiffen too. Not as much as the diabetics, because our sugar doesn't go as high, but they do stiffen, and that's why sugar impairs blood flow if you have it in high amounts. If you dump it into the blood faster than you take it out, you sludge the blood flow. Now they've done experiments on this. It's really interesting. You give someone a list of math problems, and you time them, and you check their accuracy. If you do it in a fasting state, they'll have a certain accuracy and speed. And then you give them a couple really sweet drinks, their accuracy goes down and their speed goes down.
Because
Why?
of the blood.
They're not getting enough blood flow to the brain, and they can't think as clearly.
You just ruined my afternoon dessert.
I know. But it's important. If your mother probably said you can't have your dessert until the end of the meal.
Yes.
Well, listen to your mother. Why? Because you already have the other food in your stomach, then you put the dessert in there, and you don't absorb the sugar as rapidly. The worst thing that you can do for your blood flow is to have sugar or a sugary dessert between meals. Like a soda, don't go there. Soda, if you're going to, first of all, don't even have one. But if you're going to have a soda, have it with your meal so that the other things can kind of slow down the absorption.
Interesting, because when I think of sugar, and you mentioned specifically processed sugars,
right,
like white table sugar, that kind of stuff, I think about my blood sugar. I think about diabetes. I don't think about my circulation.
Well, circulation is really where the rubber meets the road, because who cares if your blood sugar is high if it doesn't do any damage? But it does damage in several ways, one of which is the red blood cell. White blood cells, the same thing happens. So, I always know that after Christmas, after Thanksgiving, and after Easter, there are going to be more infections. Why? because people eat a lot of sugar at those times, and the white blood cell membranes also stiffen. And if they're stiff, they can't get out of the blood and out into the tissue where they need to eat up the bacteria or the virus. And when they do get there, how do they eat them? Well, they flow around them, pull them in, and then digest them. But if, because of a high sugar intake, their membrane is stiffer, they go out there and they're the viruses, they're the bacteria, and they bump up against them, but they can't invaginate around them and pull them in to eat them up. Wow. All from just sugar, and that has to do with blood flow. Wow. Amazing.
You mentioned water. Who would have thought that something so simple and so readily available in this country could actually lower our risk of cardiovascular disease and stroke?
You know, we hear about the statin drugs. I could name them, but look, you know about statins. There's, well, simvastatin and pravastatin and all the statins, atorvastatin. And they're the wonderful drugs for heart. Did you know that the maximum dose statin will reduce your risk of having a heart attack by about 30 to 35%? And water, which is free, does better.
Wow.
You know, I can't sell that stuff. I mean, some people make a living selling it, but you can get it right out of your tap. And you say, well, I don't like the chlorine. Just leave it there for 5 minutes or 10 or 20, and then the chlorine will evaporate, boil out, and then it tastes almost as good as bottled water. Oh, there might be some things in it, but you know, water, even city water, is very good for your body.